Good afternoon. I'd like to start today's show talking a little bit about some unsettling news relating to the Ukraine mobilisation that we're hearing. Some reports coming out now on two fronts that both appear to be quite unsettling, or somewhat troubling anyhow, particularly if you are a man of fighting age within Ukraine. There are reports that the Ukrainian Ministry of Defence has published an order which will now expand and increase the range of people who are considered suitable to be called up for the war or to fight against the Russian special military operation. Some of these categories relate to people who you would normally consider to be of limited fitness, and they are now subject to conscription within Ukraine. If the reporting is correct, some of the categories which will now be included in conscription are people known to be suffering from tuberculosis, hepatitis, HIV, people with mild mental disorders and neurotic disorders, people with certain diseases of the central nervous system, blood and endocrine system, and people with episodic paroxysmal disorders, panic attacks, fainting, dizziness, epileptic seizures. So this is, if it is to be believed, this reporting is an indication that Ukraine is mobilizing and that Ukraine is struggling and is required to mobilize to this depth within its population, where it apparently has reached the limits of the fit, healthy men of fighting age, which would normally be conscripted in a time of war, to now extend that to people with known conditions, conditions which would appear to be ones which would be, in some cases, depending upon activity, transmissible, ones which may require a certain amount of medication to treat while in the field. So this all introduces additional hardships for those people, introduces additional logistics and challenges on the front lines, particularly concerning people with central nervous system, mental health disorders, those sort of things. Those people being called up, they will suffer very badly, as you can imagine, on the front line in a war where there is a very high chance of them being injured or killed in that war. These are people who are already suffering mentally, not coping with the world as it is today. Putting them into frontline combat positions is cruel and unusual behaviour. Now, all of this is being reported on a backdrop of additional reporting around corruption in the recruiting areas of the Ministry of Defence, and reports that this is actually coming from the Kiev Post. Reports that now Poland may start extraditing Ukrainian draft dodgers. The Statista.com website reports that 15 million Ukrainian refugees have fled Ukraine through Poland. Now, that's 15 million in total. That's men, women, and children. Not all of those 15 million have remained in Poland. I believe that Poland indicates about 3 million Ukrainian refugees are currently in Poland. Now, that 15 million, that rate appeared to escalate quite rapidly since March of 2023, with 6 million people leaving Ukraine in the previous 6 months. So on average, 1 million a month, which has been an uptick from March. Prior to that, if you looked at the curve was much flatter. It's now spiking up. And reports that 30,000 people in the last 24 hours have left Ukraine to Poland. So these are large numbers. Obviously, many of these people are leaving because they need to leave. Where they're living is no longer under what was Ukrainian control. It's now under Russian control. They are leaving because they are being evacuated. They have nowhere else to go. They are leaving because there is no economy operating in Ukraine. There is no jobs and no work and no money. So the second concerning point, if this is true, and this is being reported by the Kiev Post, is that Poland may start to extradite Ukrainian draft dodgers. What has been written here is that Ukrainian lawmakers suggest that Kiev should begin extradition procedures for men of military age who have illegally escaped to Poland and other EU countries, thanks to bribes. So this is the allegations of medical staff in the military receiving bribes to then write fake medical certificates for those men, providing the bribes, indicating they are unfit for military service, and those men are then leaving Ukraine, not taking the chance that they may get pulled up anyhow. As we see, this may well be happening now, with new rules expanding the net that can be used to draw people into conscription for this war. But many of them are getting a medical certificate and then leaving the country. And one of the criteria of leaving the country successfully is having something like a medical certificate to prove that you are unable to fight. You are then allowed to leave. So this is David Arachmia, who's the leader of Ukraine's Servant of the People Party. Servant of the People Party is one of the larger parties in the Ukraine. They have a coalition of parties operating there at the moment. He's saying that Ukrainian law enforcement agencies should demand the extradition of men of military age who have illegally left Ukraine to escape mobilisation and prosecute them. The prosecution, I imagine, would just turn into being sent to the front lines, one would think. President Zelensky has ordered a full review of all releases granted since the start of Russia's invasion in 2022. Now, that will become an interesting challenge if people have moved into Poland and then out of Poland into other EU states. There is reporting that Poland, Romania may even be considering doing similar things. Now, I can't corroborate this yet, but you could imagine that Ukraine may start to put pressure on those nations to find Ukrainian men who have left the country, and if they appear to be capable of fighting, to suspend their visas and extradite them back to Ukraine. Okay, I will get to a daily update on the battlefront, but just going to go through a couple of the news items first. So back to the grain deal, the Black Sea Grain Initiative. We've spoken about this before a number of times. Now, President Erdogan of Turkey has met in Sochi with President Putin of Russia, and one of the topics that they have discussed is the restarting of the grain deal. The grain deal was concluded in July when Russia chose not to extend the grain deal again. And now there's some of the reporting that has come out of the discussion with President Erdogan of Turkey and President Putin is that President Erdogan has stated that Russia is not happy, and has said, interestingly, is rightfully not happy that 44% of the Ukrainian grain goes to Europe and not to poorer nations. So we have heard in the Western media a lot of cries of Russia choosing to starve the poorer nations of the planet by cancelling the grain deal. They didn't cancel the grain deal, they just didn't extend the grain deal. But what has become apparent is that the bulk of the Ukrainian grain does not go to the developing nations. It does in fact go to European nations. The Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dmytro Kuleba, he has stated that while he will wait for further information from the Turkish delegates, that Ukraine will not make any concessions on the issue of resuming the grain deal. I would suggest that the grain deal is not going to extend or be renewed. We have here on one hand President Putin commenting as part of this, as part of the televised speeches on this. Putin stated that the food corridors were not supposed to be used for military purposes, but they were being used that way by Ukraine, and that gas pipelines, including Blue Stream, are being attacked by drones. So I'll just go to our screen here so we can have a quick look at what he's talking about here. So this is the Black Sea. and looking at the Black Sea, coming from just south of the Kerch Strait and the Sea of Azov, is a Turk Stream pipeline, and then the Blue Stream one, which is from slightly further to the east along the coast of the Black Sea, from Beregovaya. This is a compressor station here where the gas is piped and then compressed and then repiped through Blue Stream to Samsun port in Turkey. The pipeline, the Blue Stream pipeline, carries natural gas to Turkey. It is co-owned by a group of organisations. Gazprom owns some of it. Turkish energy company Botas owns some of it as well. And Development Netherlands joint venture and an Italian organisation are involved in it. So President Putin stating that the Blue Stream pipeline has been attacked by drones. Now, we have had reports in the past of Russian military boats, naval boats, being in the Black Sea, coming under attack from drone surface craft, and reporting at that stage that they were in a patrolling operation and patrolling mission and patrolling the pipelines. So I don't know how it is that the details not given on these drone attacks, on how they would attack these pipelines. I mean, it may be as simple as dropping some sort of sea mine or explosive that drops to the floor of the ocean. These pipelines may be suspended above the ocean floor. I'm not sure of how they're constructed exactly. But an interesting comment that President Putin brought this up. The comment he brought up about the food corridors with the Black Sea Grain Initiative being used to ship for military purposes. This is one of the first times, I think, that he's come out and sort of stated this openly. There has been a lot of speculation that this was part of Russia's concern, that Ukraine was using perhaps outbound, but more likely inbound tankers and freighters coming in empty to pick up grain to supply weapons to the Odessa ports of Ukraine. Again, I can't confirm that, but that is some of the talk and speculation that was floating around in July at the time of the Black Sea Grain Initiative not being extended by Russia. In some other big news here, Ukrainian President Zelensky has effectively let go of his defense minister, Oleksiy Reznikov. He's announced that Reznikov has been dismissed as of today. In an interview that Reznikov just gave yesterday, he mentioned that $100 billion in aid has been provided to Ukraine, $50 billion of that from the US, and that they are spending $100 million a day on military operations. So that's quite a bit of coin, $100 million a day, $700 million a week on military operations. His departure comes after months of corruption allegations against his ministry. So there have been varying levels of allegations of corruption within the Ministry of Defence, as I say, as before, reaching down to the mobilisation forces, the medical staff there accepting bribes to write false medical certificates, and also other allegations of bribery and mismanagement of funds. Now, you can imagine that if you are at the head of an organisation which is spending $100 million a day, there would be ways and means for some of that to fall through the cracks and for people to, corruptly obtain some of that money. Reznikov is out. His replacement is Rustem Umerov. And an interesting note that I heard on Umerov is that he was part of the original negotiating team negotiating with the Russians back in March and April of 2022, when we believe that Ukraine had almost reached the point of putting ink on paper with an agreement with Russia that would have seen the special military operation cease in April last year, would have avoided all of these deaths. So perhaps Rustem Umerov being positioned here as someone new, someone who perhaps the Russians may be able to begin some sort of talks and discussions or negotiations with. We'll see. We'll see more, certainly, as the Minister of Defence for Ukraine is a high-profile role, so we'll expect to see quite a bit more of Rustem Umerov in the near future. In other news, now, this is relating to an update on the Russian Su-34s. The Su-34s have reportedly now been upgraded or modified so that they can carry the Kinzhal missile. So on the screen there is some pictures of the Kinzhal missiles. Now, the Kinzhal missile is a hypersonic air-launched ballistic missile. Its range is up to 2,000 kilometers, and it has a maximum speed of Mach 10, which is a little over 12,000 kilometers per hour. Now, this is a problem for anyone who's having this type of missile fired at them. Reason being is that they are very difficult to shoot down. The Patriot missile system, it can intercept incoming targets up to a speed of Mach 3.5. So incoming missiles traveling upwards of 4,500 kilometers an hour, the Patriot system can detect them and intercept them. Now, the Kinzhal is traveling at 3 times that speed, so I don't believe it is within the range of the Patriot to be able to shoot down. Now, previously, the Kinzhal could only be launched from MiG-31s and Tu-22M3, the big Tupolev bombers. But in terms of fighter or small bomber craft, the MiG-31. Now, however, this update means that the more modern Su-34 is capable of carrying and launching the Kinzhal missiles. Now, the Su-34, the fullback, I think it's also sometimes referred to as the duckling, given its unusual sort of duckbill-shaped nose. This is a far more modern fighter, and more importantly for this conflict, Russia has approximately 30 to 35 MiG-31s that are currently operational. However, they have reportedly 120 Su-34s, which are currently operational. So not only does the Su-34 have less in terms of maintenance requirements and operational costs, it is a more modern and a higher performing aircraft in general, so more likely to be able to avoid and neutralize air defense targets and other airborne competitors. But also, now Russia has effectively lifted its number of aircraft capable of launching Kinzhals, if we exclude the Tupolev bombers, from 35 to 150. Now, moving on to just talking a little bit about some Ukrainian drones and progress. As you know, I bang on quite a bit about drones being the real game changer of this conflict, and I am looking at doing another video where I'll move away from a daily update, but I'm going to cover off some of the technology that's been used in this conflict. So that might come out in the next week or so if I get some time. Anyhow, on drones, Euromaidanpress.com is reporting that the Ukrainian Defense Ministry has approved a Seika Scout drone with artificial intelligence elements integrated into its system for mass production and use by the Ukrainian army. The drone system, the artificial intelligence allows this drone system to independently recognize and record the coordinates of enemy equipment, even if it's camouflaged. It does this with the help of advanced optics and neural network identification AI technology. Once it has identified possible targets, it transmits this information to command posts, and they can then make an appropriate decision Um, this is giving the Ukrainians an increased ability to identify and detect targets on the ground. So rather than relying on a human flying an FPV drone in a reconnaissance mode, looking through bush, looking for people on the ground, looking for equipment, being distracted by smoke in the distance or an approaching vehicle, or just perhaps light conditions making it difficult to see through the leaves to see what might be camouflaged on the ground. These drones, with their advanced optics and AI capability, should be able to very accurately identify targets on the ground. This particular drone, the Seika Scout, they have a flight range of 10 kilometres and a payload capacity of up to 3 kilometres, and are equipped with infrared optics. There's commentary from people in Washington saying that we need a system capable of operating autonomously on land, in water, and in the air. We need drones, we need artificial intelligence and improved interaction between units. And so that comes from NATO General Philip Levin. The Pentagon has also reportedly launched a new project called Diana, and this will focus on technical innovations which are planned to be commissioned in 2025. And again, this is talking about drone technology, swarming drone technology, autonomous drone technology, where we will rapidly next year, I imagine, start to see stories of drones flying independently, identifying targets, calling in support drones autonomously, and those drones then filming the attacks, determining if the target was destroyed or just damaged, sending a second drone in to attack if required. And all of this will now be taken out of the hands of humans. These drone wars will be happening on the frontline area, with less of a reliance upon humans to be involved even in that activity. Okay, just moving then onto the update, the battlefront update in Ukraine today. So just get our map back here for a moment. There we go. So starting up in the north, on the northern line, up here in the Kharkiv region, Kupiansk. So Kupiansk region. In Kupiansk direction, this is reporting from the Ministry of Defence, the Zapad group of forces, aviation and artillery have repelled 4 counterattacks by assault groups of the 32nd and 43rd Mechanised Brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, north of Sverdlovka. In addition, Russian troops have struck Ukrainian manpower and hardware close to Solonoye, Ivanovka, Timkovka, and Sinkovka in the Kharkov region, as well as Novoskolovsky in the Lugansk People's Republic. So we're seeing Sinkovka up here, Novoselivsky here. So active fighting all along this line here, with the Russians continuing, it seems, to make slow advances across towards the Oskol River here. The Oskol River being their prime target in this area. If they can reach the Oskol River, they're then able to roll down the Oskol River, using it as a natural protective barrier on their flank as they move down that line, looking then to meet up with Russian troops coming up from Torsky and the Liman region. The Ministry of Defence reports that the enemy losses are up to 60 Ukrainian servicemen, 3 motor vehicles, and 1 Polish-manufactured Krab self-propelled artillery system. Now, in the Krasny Liman area, here, we'll just move our map up a little. And Krasny Liman here. Units of the Centre Group of Forces in cooperation with Army Aviation and Artillery have hit manpower and hardware concentration areas of the 63rd and 67th Mechanised Brigade and the 12th Special Forces Brigade near Yampolovka, Chervonaya Dubrova, and near the Serbiansky Forest. Now, this is a forested area around here. This large forested area where there is a lot of fighting going on through this area here. Difficult fighting, a lot of coverage for both Ukrainian and Russian forces moving through the forested areas. The reported losses in the Krasny Liman direction were up to 40 Ukrainian servicemen, 3 pickup trucks, and 1 D-30 howitzer. Now, just moving now to the Donetsk region. So here we're talking about Bakhmut, Klishchiivka, Kramatorsk, these areas here. In Donetsk direction, the Yug forces are operating in cooperation with aviation, artillery, and again the heavy flamethrower systems, the TOS-1 thermobaric systems. They've repelled 3 attacks of Ukrainian assault forces close to Artyomovsk, which is Bakhmut, and Severnoye. This area around Bakhmut and Klishchiivka has still continued to be the areas of the heaviest fighting over the last few weeks, while there is a large push further into the Zaporozhye region, which we'll get to, around Robotne and Verbova. It seems that the intensity of the fighting around Klishchiivka and attempting to get into Bakhmut is just still at another level. Again, we have had reports in the last week of daily losses of 200-300 reported Ukrainian soldiers in this area. Today, the reporting is that enemy losses were up to 285 Ukrainian servicemen killed and wounded, 5 armoured fighting vehicles, 7 motor vehicles, a US-manufactured M109 Paladin, a Gvozdika self-propelled artillery system, as well as 2 US M105 howitzers. There is also a swarm of video reporting of footage today of shelling of Donetsk city itself. Now, just let me move the map here a little bit to get Donetsk up here. Now, Donetsk is south of Bakhmut. Now, Donetsk city has reportedly been under attack from Avdiivka, just north of Donetsk, since 2014. So there are reports that shelling has been going on and that today there were casualties reported in Donetsk city, civilian casualties reported due to this shelling. Moving to the South Donetsk region. So here, in the South Donetsk region, as a result of actions by the Vostok Group, using, again, Army aviation, artillery, and TOS-1 heavy flamethrower systems, enemy units have been hit close to Yorozhnoye. So, Yorozhnoye here, which is at the southern point of where the Ukrainian advance has made it down this, what's been called the Vremka Ledge, which is this area. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, my map has just zoomed itself out. I'll see if I can stop that. Oh, well, we'll leave that for now. The Vremka Ledge is an area running from Neskuchne down to Yorozhne, where the Ukrainians have at heavy costs, pushed their way down, suffering under the fact that the Russians have held high ground on the western flank as they have travelled south. The reporting today is that the enemy losses were 120 Ukrainian servicemen, 2 armoured fighting vehicles, and 9 motor vehicles. Also, 1 ammunition depot of the 79th Air Assault Brigade has been destroyed. Now, moving to Zaporozhye direction. This is where the fighting has been centered on Rabotne or Robotino and Verbova. This area is the main assault push by the Ukrainians at the moment. This has been in the news repeatedly over the last couple of weeks, with Hanna Maya, the Deputy Defense Minister of Ukraine, claiming that Robotny has been captured by the Ukrainian forces. However, this appears to not be the case. There seems to have been a change in tactics, where the Ukrainians have decided to move eastwards of Robotny and then push their attack towards Verbova. Verbova, just in front of Verbova, is the first of the Russian defensive lines, the real Russian defensive lines. Ukraine have not reached that in any numbers yet. There have been some reports that they may have had some troops on foot reach through, but they have not managed to position any armour there or to pierce through the front line or to inflict any damage, it seems, on the Russian positions yet. There is some reporting of some Ukrainian shelling in Verbove happening. There is also, a great deal of FPV drone footage from the Boba group of Russian drone pilots, showing them focusing on the southern areas of Robotny. So it appears as though the Ukrainians have pushed down into the south of Robotny, but they are, from this video footage, having a very tough time of maintaining those positions, those trenches there. I also saw some reporting that part of the Russian success in the southern area of Robotny has been due to the fact that they have been maintaining tunnels which were not visible from the surface, and these tunnels were allowing the Russians to connect between series of trenches. And so when they were coming under Ukrainian shelling, they were able to depart one trench line to the safety of tunnels and then even move to another trench line and resume fighting from there. It seems that this has come to light as some shelling from the Ukrainians has destroyed some of this tunnel section that's now visible from the surface. There is a little bit of Russian reporting from what is happening in the area today. I'll just read a little bit of that. Reporting from a Russian correspondent. Ukraine is pushing forward. There are oncoming battles. The Russian army is counterattacking near Robotny and Verbova on the Zaporozhye front. The direction of the main attack of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Orokhovsky section of the Zaporozhye front, which is the defense zone of the 58th Army of the Southern Military District. Before the attacks, the Ukrainians are conducting artillery preparation using cluster munitions. So here, the cluster munitions provided by the US Department of Defense, these munitions which explode in the air to then rain down smaller explosive charges, which are useful when dealing with infantry. In this case, quite possibly men advancing through fields or out of trenches and things. So the Ukrainians are using those in preparation before their assaults. In the early morning, it goes on to say, in the early morning, afternoon and evening, the armed forces of Ukraine again and again throw infantry into the attack in small groups in attacks on our positions at the Robotny-Verbova line. They go on to say, heavy fighting continues in the Robotny-Verbova and Robotno-Novoprokhovka sectors. This Novoprokhovka is just south of Robotny. The situation is dynamic. Positions move from one side to the other during the day. Counterattacks of the Ukrainian armed forces continue southeast of the village of Robotino, northeast of the village of Novoprokhovka, and northwest of the village of Verbove. So this is in this area, this little pocket to the east of Robotny and to the northwest of Verbove and to the northeast of Novoprokhovka. That is an area which is slightly lower in elevation than the areas which the Russians are in, and reporting is that losses to the Ukrainians in this area are heavy due to that fact. The reporting goes on to say the enemy still fails to take control of the outskirts of Robotny, a village under heavy fire from our troops. So, as I mentioned, I think the Ukrainians have managed to push down and capture the bulk of Robotny, but the very most southern tipped areas of it, it appears they perhaps have not established full control over that, and those regions there are the areas where this Boba drone footage was shown, geolocated to be showing multiple strikes against men in those trenches there from the air from these drones. At Verbova, Ukrainian assault detachments seek to break through landings to the outskirts of Verbova, where fleeting battles break out, Ukrainian forces then being pushed back by the Russians. Between Robotno and Verbova, several attacks were again repelled by our paratroopers. So we can see the activity in this area is intense. Repeated attack and counterattack from both sides. The Russians apparently having better positions, not only having some tunnel capabilities, not knowing how much else they might have in this area, but it being revealed at least just to the south of Robotny. Also holding the higher ground in the areas around Verbova and Robotny. And, of course, still, if they are pressed, able to fall back to the main defensive line, which the Ukrainians have not yet been able to attack and break through. So this area really becoming very tough, a tough struggle for Ukraine. The Ministry of Defense of Russia reports that in the Zaporozhye region in the last 24 hours, the Ukrainian losses were up to 115 Ukrainian servicemen, 2 armoured fighting vehicles, 4 motor vehicles, 2 M777 artillery systems, 2 M109 Paladin self-propelled howitzers, 2 US-manufactured M119 howitzers, as well as 2 D30 and 1 D20 guns. Now, I've reported a lot in the last 2 weeks about the increasing number of artillery that the Russians are claiming to be striking and destroying. Here in Zaporozhye region, in one day, we see reportedly 9 just in this area here. And in the quick calculations I did on the video of the weekly summary from last week, it was somewhere between 17 and 20 on average pieces of artillery across the front line the Russians are claiming to destroy each day. Now, if these numbers are to be believed, then this is a very high rate of loss, to be losing 10 in just the Zaporozhye region in one day. And, you know, these are serious pieces of equipment too. These aren't old Soviet era, all of them. 2 M777s in there, Paladin self-propelled howitzers. Now, these self-propelled ones are particularly valuable because they are capable of doing the shoot and scoot, of firing and then moving, so that return artillery fire is ineffective upon you. You shoot and you get out of there. Your fixed artillery suffers from what we've spoken about before, the and counter battery radar systems that both sides are using, but the Ukrainians use them to detect the location of where a shell was fired from, and then they return fire to that location. Your Paladins, in theory, these self-propelled howitzers, should be able to shoot and then vacate that area and be somewhat protected from that tactic. Okay, also an ammunition depot of the 124th Brigade of the Territorial Defence of Ukraine has been hit in the Kherson region. Enemy losses in this area are 35 Ukrainian servicemen, 8 motor vehicles, 1 M777 artillery system, 1 M-Star-B howitzer. Kherson region, we have seen sort of a decrease in news, or a lull in news and fighting over the last week. These reported numbers of 35 servicemen are a little higher than they have been for the last couple of days. They've been around 15 or 20, so perhaps some activity picking up there. The Ukrainians are known to be utilizing the islands in the Dnieper River there more actively than the Russians, and so they may be again attempting to use those for the purposes of placing drone repeaters to allow them to extend their range on their drones, electronic warfare capabilities to interact with the Russian ability to use drones. And perhaps looking to find weak points where they could make another attack over the river, like they did in Kozachi Lahiri about a few weeks ago. Finally, getting down to Odessa and the Black Sea. In Odessa, reports are that Russian drones, these are quite possibly the geranium drones, have struck a Ukrainian shipbuilding facility where unmanned boats were assembled from imported components. Now, this, I think, may tie into some of what the military use of the grain corridor that Putin mentioned was before, what he's referring to. In this case, it may be that what were supposedly empty grain ships coming into the Odessa ports were in fact bringing with them componentry like this, Western pieces for semi-submersible and surface craft autonomous boats, which can be packed with explosives and have been used against the Kerch Bridge and against Russian military and freighter ships, the SIG as an example. So that may be what has been happening, and this is reportedly what has happened in Odessa overnight, that the drone attacks were at a shipbuilding facility where unmanned boats, drone surface craft, were assembled from imported components. Finally, in the Black Sea, now this is about the third day of reports similar to this. Reporting is that last night, the Black Sea Fleet naval aviation aircraft destroyed 4 US-manufactured Willard Seaforce high-speed military boats with landing groups of Ukrainian Special Operation Forces in the northwestern part of the Black Sea. So this is Ukrainian forces attempting to land on Crimea, or perhaps at Sevastopol, around there. There is definitely some plan the Ukrainians have at the moment relating to landing special forces in Crimea. As I say, this is about the third report of such an unsuccessful attack in the last week that I've seen. These attacks often launched from Snake Island, which is just off the coast of Odessa. They will use that as a sort of a preparation ground, and then from there base these attacks, well, in this case with high-speed Willard Seaforce military boats. Okay, that's about it for me today. Apologies for my coughing and that. I've got myself a good cold, and I'm going to head back to bed, I think, shortly. Hey, I hope you're enjoying the reports. If you have not already subscribed, please subscribe. If you have subscribed, please share the link to the channel, the Deep 404, with someone that you think would enjoy the channel. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.